Good afternoon, welcome to the Wildlife World live stream with me, Dan Rouse. So all the projects we're going to be talking about today can be found at wildlifeworld.co.uk/Facebook Live, and everything will be on there with prices, more details and any deals or offers we have on at the moment. So talking about offers, we have National Nest Box Week. So for all nest boxes on the website, it's 20% off. So National Nest Box Week started in 1997 by the BTO, and it essentially tries to get us putting more nest boxes either in our garden or in local green spaces. So there's a huge amount of nest boxes on the market, from small ones to large ones to wicker ones to wood. So basically we're going to go through a few of my particular favourites from Wildlife World, and we're going to have a look at the different perks of having these ones in your garden. So the classic shaped nest box, which is this one, is basically the one you normally see on the market, the one you traditionally make yourself. So square with a pointed roof on it. So pointed roofs are particularly good for drainage, so it stops water being able to get into the nest box hole itself. So this box, you've got the slats for water to run down, but it's also got this, if you can hear it, it's metal. So this is a Woodpecker Guard. So if you have woodpeckers or predatory birds like magpies, this is thick enough that they can't be able to drill through, and that stops them poking their heads in and disturbing your young and the families inside of it. So this one is square, it's got solid bottom onto it. So these types of nest boxes and any other nest boxes, you just put these up in your garden. Ideally you want them about 1.5–2 meters off the ground. So that gives enough space for predators to be able to try and grab it, but not enough that they can jump up and try and get hold of the boxes themselves. So that sort of height for your standardised passerine nest boxes like this one is perfect. So this one is particularly good for blue tits, great tits and house sparrows. So these are perfect for those kind of species. But then if you want a different sort of feel for your garden rather than your traditional one, you can also go for a log nester. So this one, if you're putting it on a tree, it sort of blends in with that camouflage, adding a bit more protection to your birds. But this one has also got a lid roof to it. So you've got the hinges and you can screw it down to make sure the lid can't be opened by predators. But also it's perfect for clearing out your nest boxes after the breeding season has ended. So ideally you want to remove all remains, all nest material from the inside of this to stop rot. But if you have mice in your local area, you might want to pop in some sawdust for the mice to use. But this one is particularly good as a bit more natural and camouflage. So again, 1.5 or 2 meters off the ground. Your nest boxes should be facing about north or southeast. If you can get it in between those two, that is perfect. But basically it's to stop all the elements getting inside this little hole. So that will cause a bit of a turbulence. So you have wind, rain, hail, sun, all those kind of things. You want to be able to point it in a direction that the birds feel safest in and that they're the safest inside as well. So this one again is for blue tits, great tits and house sparrows or tree sparrows. But robins have a different sort of nest box. Because they're open nesters, they like to be able to see what's going on around them. So we have the teapot. So it looks like a regular teapot, sounds like a regular teapot, but this one has been adapted for robins so that you have the drainage holes on the bottom of it, but also you have this little canopy which is a rain guard. So this will drip water over the front and not into the hole. So your robins can nest inside and pop their little heads out, and they can see everything of what's going on around them. So this comes with some screws and some brackets, and that's just one simple hole for you to screw on and place it onto either fencing, or it can even be drilled into a wall. If you don't have a very large garden or you have like a balcony, you can easily pop it on there. Robins will still come and find it and they'll still know what to look for. But obviously there's other birds we can cater for in our gardens. So these may look a little bit strange to those of you who haven't used them before, but this one we have a swallow nesting cup and a house martin nesting cup. So you may have seen them around your gardens. They look very, very similar, but if I show you them upside down, you can see the house martin one, which is this one, is more of a circle, and your swallow is more of an oval shape. It's a bit pedantic, but that's essentially the difference between them. So these go underneath your house eaves or on barns or sheds, somewhere that the birds can reach them. So you attach these with the drills and with the screws that come with them, pop it underneath an eaves, and then the birds will come into it. So if I pop this one down. So what they'll do, they'll naturally fill this cavity with moss or sawdust, anything they can find naturally, and pop that in here. House martins in particular will use mud and their own saliva and build up a little hole and a ridge so that their young is safe inside. Swallows, on the other hand, their young like to pop their heads over the top. But if you want one of these, they've also come in with that drainage hole. But if you want one of these and worried about the mess, what you can do, underneath your house eave, about 2 meters down, you can put a solid piece of wood, and all the drop-ins from this, because they can be quite messy, especially with the speed that they hit the ground. If you put a sheet of wood, all the drop-ins will hit that wood, and it's almost like a wood guard, especially if you have patio doors like French doors. You don't want the drop-ins coming down. So if you pop a little piece of wood, then all the drop-ins will be caught on that, and then you can just replace that and then clean that as well. So that's all of our nest boxes. So these are all 20% off on the website on wildlifeworld.co.uk/Facebook Live. Oh, we have a question.
Can we just ask, what about, should you fill them with anything, or can you leave anything out in your garden for the birds?
Birds are very, very intelligent, but what you can do is provide some sort of material. So pet fur is brilliant, particularly stronger pet fur, like spaniels have that sort of wiry texture, and cats. So as you're brushing your pets, if you take it out of the brush, and if you have fat ball feeders, the ones with spirals or the solid ones, if you put the material in there, the birds will come and collect it as and when they want to. Or even dried moss or some sawdust. If you want to pop that in the bottom, it adds a bit more cushion and it looks a bit more inviting for the birds, but you don't have to. The birds will come and find it, and they will do that all themselves. But if you want to provide a little helping hand, pet fur, moss, small pieces of wool and shredded paper are all perfect, and something we all have in our homes that we can use for them. So aside from nest boxes, if you're looking to observe the wildlife in your garden, we have the Wildlife World Wildlife Observation Camera, which is this one. You may have seen some sneak videos appearing on the Facebook and YouTube channels, but this doesn't look like much. It's a little green box, but this has got batteries inside of it, and you pop this in your garden. It's got the screw base. You can either put a mini tripod, or it does come with a stand. You can pop this in your garden, and it uses infrared to detect activity. So you can either put it facing your nest box to see if anything's going in and out of it, or on your feeders, or if you're using our hedgehog equipment, you can have it facing the hedgehogs as well. But what's so good about this particular model, and the one that we have here, is it connects to an app on your phone. So as long as this camera has got Wi-Fi, and you can be in a different Wi-Fi zone, as long as this camera has got Wi-Fi, you can check the app on your phone and you'll be notified if there's activity on your camera. So if you were wanting to point this at your nest box to see if a bird enters it, you will get a buzz on your phone telling you a bird has been detected or an item has been detected on the camera. So you haven't even got to leave the house. If you're in an area, I live in Wales, so if you're in an area that has lots of bad weather, you haven't got to leave the house. You can just sit and watch your camera live on your phone, or you can be notified if something happens. So if you're going out and you point it towards your hedgehog feeding station or your hedgehog burrow, you'll be notified if a hedgehog appears. So these are on the website as well, on that web page I just mentioned, but these are brand new and they're perfect if you're looking to do more and see more in your garden. We also have nest box cameras available, so if you are buying a nest box from us for Nest Box Week, you can also provide nest box cameras. But if you wanted a generalised wildlife observation camera, this one is perfect. Oh, another question.
Why do you believe swallow numbers were down so much last year?
Swallow numbers are a bit tricky to monitor. So swallows will migrate over to us from Africa, But there's been about a few in the country, maybe 5 that have stayed throughout winter. Swallows traditionally come over and then they'll breed with us. Because we had such a poor year last year, a lot of the breeding attempts were sort of drained out and sogged out. So normally swallows will have 2 broods a year. We've got lovely gusts at the moment. But normally swallows will have 2 broods and then they'll either rear a third, depending. If they come over in April, they may go for 3 broods. They normally have 3 broods of about 4 young. Or if they come over in May, they might go for 2 broods. Because the weather was so bad last year, a lot of these birds didn't come over until May, maybe June time, so they only had 1 or 2 broods. So on average, the number of eggs laid and the number of chicks that fledged was lower than average. But hopefully this year we've had a little bit of a warm spell, so the swallows should be starting to come over April time. So hopefully we should have a booster year this year and get the numbers back on track. So let's have a look at what we can have a look at next. So another new product from Wildlife World are now venturing into plants and bulbs. So we've got, if I show you this one, this is the Happy Butterfly mix. We've also got a Happy Bee mix. The butterfly is the pink packaging, the bees are the purple packaging. But basically what these are, they are perfect plants for your garden if you are looking to attract bees, butterflies, moths and other pollinators. So these cover 1 meter square, either in a border. If you have a large garden, you may want to put in a border. If you have a balcony or small garden or a terrace garden, they're also brilliant for containers. So these have a variety of different plants in them. So if I show you some that we have open. So this is Dahlia. So you have a nice selection of them. So you just plant these about 3 times the size of the bulb. So if your bulb is about that long, you want to plant it 3 times that size below the surface. So not the size of the plant, the size of the bulb itself. So larger bulbs like that one, you may want to plant a bit deeper. But if you're in a particularly windy area, if you plant them just a little bit further, it'll stop them blowing over. Otherwise you may need to put a stake in and attach them to the stake. So we have dahlias in here. Everyone knows dahlias, very, very vibrant, very big flowers, which are perfect for large species of butterfly or bees, such as your buff-tailed bumblebee, or you've got peacock butterflies, the larger varieties that need that perching edge. But on the subject of larger flowers, we also have a lily. This is the bee mix. So we've got a lily in here, it's a bright, bright yellow one. So lilies are very, very heavily scented. So for your twilight species, such as moths, particularly hawk moths that rely on heavily scented plants like lavender, lilies are very, very heavily scented. So we can smell them quite well. So if we had smaller species that need somewhere to follow their nose and somewhere to go for food, lilies are that perfect plant. So what else can we have a look at? So we, as well as the big statement plants like our lilies and our dahlias, we have smaller ones. So we've got these ones, which are the anemones. So these, if you just soak them the night before, the seeds themselves are quite solid and quite hard. But if you just soak them the night before and then plant them, they have a higher chance of sprouting. But these are quite small. They sort of resemble poppies in that sort of way. But they have very wide flowers. So larger species or smaller species that need to feed but not get water attracted to them. So things like your solitary bees, if they are looking for food, they don't want to travel inside of a flower. If you imagine a tulip, they don't want to travel into it as they might risk water attaching to them. So instead, you give them something like this, which is a very flat surfaced flower that they can feed upon without getting things attached to them. So that's the smaller varieties. So with your statement ones, you want to put your statement plants in the middle and then put your smaller varieties around that edge so the sun naturally attracts to each plant. And finally, which is a personal favourite of mine, we also have some tubers in there. So it's not just bulbs and some seeds. We've also got tubers. So this one's a coreopsis. So it's sort of like a ground creeper plant. If you imagine sedum or mint in that sort of way, this travels via the roots. So So as the roots spread, it sprouts, and the sprouts then attract different species to them, and they'll also travel across the floor, giving you a larger ground cover. So if you're trying to cover an area, so these ones are perfect for 1 metre square, either in border form or in container form. But if you're trying to attract different plants and attract different wildlife, you want to have a mixture of statement tall plants as well as ground cover. So the ground cover for these are also really, really good for things like hedgehogs, where it provides that cover for them to travel in and out of your garden. So we offer all of our mixes. Well, I say all, we've only got 2 at the moment, but we'll see how well these go. So these mixes are $9.99 each. But if you head over to the website, the wildlifeworld.co.uk/Facebook Live, you can have 2 packets for £17.98. So you haven't got to have 2 pink ones, unless you want 2 pink ones. You can have a butterfly and a bee one, you can have 2 bee or 2 butterfly, or you can order as many as you want using that offer as well. So we'll see if there's any more questions have popped up.
Do you want to put them straight into sunlight? Do you want to put them a bit shaded?
Ideally you want to put them in direct sunlight, or if you can get sort of partial sunlight, that would be perfect. So something like, if you're in a garden, if you imagine a garden, if you put them in direct sunlight, they'll have the better chance of reaching the amount of sunlight they need so that they start sprouting out quicker, as these are summer plants. So if you plant them in March, April time, which is just coming up, if you plant them then, they'll be sprouting about June through till August. So when our pollinators are most active during that peak time, then these are the perfect plants for them, as they'll be sprouting that same sort of time. So this covers all different species in all different areas. So ideally they don't want to be in full shade. If you can get partial sunlight, that is perfect, at least a few hours a day. But ideally full sunlight would be great if you can get them for that.
And where do you want to place your feeder versus your nest versus your bulbs?
So that's how, it's a bit of a tricky one, but you basically got to plan your garden for the species you want to attract. So if you're wanting to attract birds, you look at where you want your plants to go. So you want your plants away from your feeders so that the birds don't start eating from the plants. You want them to use the plants after the pollinators have used them. When things like butterflies have their caterpillars, birds will use that as a food source. So if we pop these in the furthest point away from your feeder, your feeding station then becomes the primary food source. So ideally you want different types of feeders in one area, and if you do have enough space, if you have a secondary feeder, that is perfect for smaller species and those that are more shy. So if you've got things like blue tits, great tits and robins visiting your garden, a lot of people have starlings visiting their gardens. So if you have those in areas that are most active, your smaller and shyer species like your coal tits, what other ones can I think of? Long-tailed tits and house sparrows are a little bit more timid. So if you have another feeder about a few meters apart from your primary feeder, then everyone is happy. But ideally you want those the opposite end to your plants. Nest boxes can be placed anywhere in your garden, depending on the nest box you buy. So our swallow and house martin ones do need to be affixed to a house or eaves, or even if you have balconies, it can even be put onto that, the birds will find it. Robins do need a lot of cover, so you do need to place them either in trees or next to a hedge or in ivy, which is particularly good. It's also good for pollinators. But you want to pop that somewhere where there's lots of cover, as robins are particularly wary nesters. But if you're wanting to have more than one nest box in your garden, you do need them in opposite corners. So if you think of a classic terrace garden, you want to have maybe your species that are a bit more aggressive nesters, like your blue tit and great tit. You want to have that at one end, and maybe a quieter species like your robin teapot in the opposite end. So you can have more than one nest box in one garden, but you want to make sure that they both have areas of territories in your garden as well. But ideally you don't want to have it next door to a feeding station, as you don't want competition to be interfering with your birds. So I think we might either have one question, or I think that is done from us. So now we've got our website live. We've also got that link live, the /Facebook Live. If you head to that, all of these products that we've selected out will be on there with more information about them, as well as their pricing and the offers we mentioned, with the 2 packets for $17.98 or the 20% off nest boxes. But if you are on social media, don't forget to share your products in action with us. We'd love to see what you're finding in your garden. So that's all from us from now, and we'll see you again at the next live.